This date symbolizes how far into the year women must work to earn what men earned in the previous year. Since the second half of the 20th century, women's labor force participation has grown significantly. Women are working longer hours and pursuing higher education in greater numbers. However, despite this progress, significant wage gaps between men and women persist, particularly for women of color. In the month of March, I am launching the privilege tax. This initiative calls attention to today's wage inequality. Will you join me? Visit 11byvenus.com to get involved. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, myself, and a wonderful group of people, including Alexis, Ohanian, Tracy Anderson, and more, for our conversation on pay equality for women. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm very excited about this. It's something that I have also personally faced in my career as a tennis player. And I'm really honored to be joined today by this incredible group of people to talk about an issue that's super important to me, the issue of the gender pay gap. We currently live in a world where women make 81 cents to the dollar that men earn. Women are working longer hours and pursuing higher education in greater numbers, but despite this progress, significant wage gaps between men and women persist, particularly for women of color. Throughout my career, I've really worked towards closing that gap in the wage gap, but there's really so much more work to do. And during the month of March, my lifestyle brand 11 by Venus is working hard to fill that gap by giving customers the opportunity and the option to pay a 19-cent privilege tax at checkout with participating brands. All the proceeds will go to Girls Inc. of the greater Los Angeles area, an incredible charity committed to inspiring girls to be strong, smart, and bold. So we're very, very excited, and I'm beyond excited to have so many amazing founders and partners aboard this movement for fundraising for Girls Inc. LA, which includes Asutra, Happy Viking, Nordstrom, Goal 5, Angel City, Tracy Anderson Studio, Credo Beauty, Ellevest, and Society 9. For those watching, if you want to learn more on how their brands can get involved, we encourage you to implement the hashtag privilege tax at checkout and collect 19 cents for every e-commerce order. Commit to a percentage, and these proceeds are committed to a percentage of at every donation. So you can visit our Knowledge and Resource Center, which will help educate and inspire young women, and most importantly, spread the word around the world. So you can share this movement with your network and your family and also your peers. That's what we're asking you to do. There's power numbers, so really please, let's take action and join the privilege tax movement and sign up at 11byvenus.com. So for today's conversation, I'm really excited to be joined by my friend and Emmy Award-winning journalist and author and co-host of The View, Sunny Hostin.
Hi there. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I wish we were all together, of course, in person, my friend, but this is the way of the world right now. But I couldn't miss the chance to, I co-host with, legendary Whoopi Goldberg every day, but I couldn't miss the chance to co-host with legendary Venus Williams. So thank you for having me. And for me, this is just such an important conversation to have. We talk about it on The View, and I talk about it with my friends. When you look at the stats, as you mentioned, on average, you have women that in the US making 18% less than men. Women are better educated, but undervalued. Diplomas don't seem to translate into dollars. Talent doesn't seem to translate into dollars when it comes to women. And I even learned recently that when women join an industry in large numbers, that the pay actually goes down, which is really something. Like, for example, wages in parks and recreation dropped by 57 percentage points when it went from being a predominantly male-dominated industry to a female-dominated industry. And the last thing I'll say to that is that, oftentimes people will say, well, women just need to ask for more. But there have been some studies, especially led by Sheryl Sandberg and her Lean In organization, that women are asking for more, but they're not getting it. So we've got plenty to talk about, Venus, but I'm really happy to be here with you.
I'm very happy to be here. Also, thank you you do this every day, so you're definitely saving me. And so I'm leaning on you to make all of us look good, no pressure. How have you personally experienced that wage gap firsthand, and how have you handled it?
Yeah, I have. And most recently, I experienced it at The View. And I've been co-hosting the show for 5 years. And I'm not saying that I should make Whoopi Goldberg's salary. She's an EGOT and has been on the show moderating for over 10 years. Or Joy Behar, who's been on the show since the beginning of the show. For over 23 years. But for me, I just assumed that my 25 plus years of legal experience, my dual roles at the network as the senior legal correspondent, as well as a View co-host, would merit at the very least the same salary as some of my more junior co-hosts, because I'm actually the third senior co-host there. And I found out through an investigation at ABC News after some racial slurs were made about me from a senior vice president of talent that I was actually being paid the least of all of the co-hosts. And that was pretty shocking to me. I suspected perhaps that was happening because Black women are typically paid less than white women. Even though women on a whole are paid less than men, I thought that perhaps at The View, which is women-centric, right? We have all female co-hosts, that I would be paid commensurate to my experience, but I wasn't. And I addressed it head on. I wrote about it in a book. I hired an attorney. And I asked for reparations for what I had been owed, and I was given that. And I am actually now being paid commiserate with my talent and my experience. But it took 5 years for that to happen, and a full-fledged investigation into racial discrimination. Mm-hmm. So while I'm pleased that for at least me, I'm being paid my value and my worth, I think it's pretty despicable that this sort of thing seems to be happening across the board. Everywhere.
And we're having this conversation so that way this next generation of women will face less and hopefully at some point face hopefully no discrimination. So I'm really excited for everyone who has joined our panel so we can discuss ways to solve that.
Yeah, and you've experienced it, right, Venus? I mean, you've sort of been a trailblazer in this.
I definitely experienced it. I definitely inherited pay inequality when I turned professional, and we took a lot of steps to get rid of that. Thank you. Thank God. But it took a lot of work, and it took the work of organizations, men, women, government, everyone to move forward and get rid of this. So it's something I'm very proud of because it was beyond my dream of what I could do for myself on the court. So I want to continue this journey and continue this to make that gap smaller outside of my sport and step into the realm of the world and take it head on.
Well, congratulations to you, because you are such a trailblazer, especially in this initiative and this panel. But let's have our panelists join us today. We have such an incredibly stellar group of people assembled.
Right.
We have the privilege to speak with Alexis Ohanian, an entrepreneur and founder of 776. He is the only guy joining us today, and his perspective is really important. So thank you, Alexis, for joining us. We also have Dawn Dobras, who is the CEO of Credo Beauty. Thank you, Dawn. We have Tracy Anderson, founder and CEO of Tracy Anderson Fitness. I have experienced those classes firsthand. Not easy. Stephanie Hull, president and CEO of Girls Inc. And then, of course, Jen Jackson Brown, executive vice president of Nordstrom. And haven't we all shopped there? They are all leaders in their respective fields, and they are paving the way for this equality that we so desperately seek and need. And our hope is by having this open dialogue about our experiences with wage inequality, that we can build some sort of awareness around this issue and work towards a more equal future. And now to kick things off, Venus, we'd love to ask the group a question.
Yeah, I think we can start just by talking about your general experiences and what it was like starting out in your respective businesses and what challenges you faced in that.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn, you can start us off.
Sure, I'd love to. So there's a couple of things. So first of all, thanks for having me on. Huge fans of everybody on the screen. I work currently at Credo Beauty, which is the largest clean beauty company in the US. And 90% of our brands, we have 135 brands in our stores. 90% of them were started by women, run by women. Our executive team is primarily female. And one thing I'm super proud to announce is that our board has moved from 100% men to 70% women. So we've really made some moves to honoring both who our customers are and the gender around that, and elevating women. Look, early on in my career, both as an entrepreneur, fundraising, as well as working, I don't think I knew always to ask. So I definitely had some advocates, male usually, that helped me get into better positions. And so I think that's an important thing that I've learned along the way. The second thing is getting at the table. Right? I can make a lot more change in my role today, and I can bring a lot more people along and have issues about pay gap, about gender representation at the board level, about maternity leave, about all these things that are so important. So it's my job to keep pulling people up behind me.
Tracy?
Oh man, I mean, I have had it on a lot of different levels, I would say, because one, coming into the fitness industry the way that I did, it still was a very male-dominated industry. Weightlifting, and this is the way with the body, you build. So I think the concept of how I did my study, and I launched my study off of a man's study on male professional athletes, but I did mine just on women, my first 5-year study. But when I went into the world, it was very interesting how, first of all, there's, the way that I moved, and as a woman, if you move a certain way or you look a certain way, you automatically don't know what you're doing in business. So you need a man to run the business. So, and what I really learned in coming up in business was I've always been very female focused, and even in hiring my first CEOs that were females with great, amazing resumes, I think something that is important to acknowledge is the women that have come before us that really paved the way to get in the room or get on the floor in Wall Street or get in those places. That fight did not come without PTSD for those women, without a lot of scars. And what I realized was, wow, in empowering a lot of these women, they had to strip away so much of their real core value to help us all get there. So it bleeds down. It really is something that is systemic and has to change, because it also has affected the women. The first waves of women that have had to get in the room have been unnaturally affected because of this, and I hate to just say it, but it's like straight white men do not exist in a vacuum, and they need an entire functioning society, to help sustain their position anyway. So they're going to things are going to have to change, and wealthy people don't just exist in a vacuum, So I've seen it on a lot of levels in a lot of ways, but it's there for sure. And I'm proud to be a part of this with you, Venus.
Thank you so much. Same. Alexis, you've been a vocal advocate for women's rights. So where do you think you get that passion and advocacy from for this issue?
Look, I know that certainly having a child and having a daughter, I think, brought it into a newer focus. I know it's a very disappointing thing when you hear powerful, straight white men say, the first time that I understood this empathy was when it, affected me directly. But you hear it often. So I'm cognizant. I want to be honest with you. That obviously amplified it for me. It made it even more deeply personal. But if I look further back, and this cuts across different lines here, because you certainly have the gender issue, and in that opening you talked about the fact that it's even worse for women of color. That pay gap is even greater. So there's a few different intersections here, right? I think what I was very fortunate to have early on was a really strong mom in my life who really made it important to raise me with an understanding of a kind of foundation of equality, and made that a priority for me. And I think that she shaped me in a lot of ways to be the man I am today. And then I think very early on in my career, especially when I think back to when I first, or this sort of second time when I came back to Reddit back in 2014 to help lead that turnaround, it was a really powerful team of women who did a lot of the great work, executives, some of whom I still work with to this day now at 776, who taught me so much about company building, culture building, rapidly scaling an organization from 40 employees to 600 in a few years, and how to do that well, how to do that with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind. And then, I get a lot of credit, more credit than I deserve, for championing paid family leave, which I think is still a really great lever to help bring more equity, more equality, and for it to be accessible to men and women, and for men to take it just as often as women do. And that was a policy Caitlin Holloway, who was our VP of People and Culture there at Reddit, that she brought, and the company didn't even have any kind of had a lot of HR needs, let's say, when we showed up in 2014, and she introduced it to me as something that she just said, look, this is what we need to do. And I said, okay, that sounds good. I hadn't given it much thought. And then when I found myself in the situation that I was in, seeing Serena in the position that she was in the days after Olympia was born, fighting for her life, it really crystallized just how important an issue this was. Because if someone with all the advantages that I had, someone who was a founder and a CEO and had every possible advantage, including a paid family leave policy at his own company that he was taking full advantage of, could feel so much helplessness in that situation, no one in this country should feel that, and especially at a moment that should be full of so much joy. And I think this is multi-layered, and getting to pay equity is going to take a lot of time, as I think lots of folks have said. And I just want to be an ally. I want to be supportive. I want to do things in my own organization, as well as the companies that we invest in now, to help them push forward things that selfishly I do want my daughter to inherit a better world than I had, and lots of young girls like her had. So that's, selfishly, at the end of the day, it still does come back to that.
Well, we like that selfishness. Yes. That's very important for men to be not just performative allies, but real allies. And having a daughter, I know, changes things. I talked to my father about that, and my husband, because we have a boy and we have a girl. And we can see the differences. We want the best for both of our children. Let me ask you this, Jen, as the executive vice president of Nordstrom. I learned that in 2019, Nordstrom announced that it had carried out this large-scale reevaluation of wages, and subsequently was able to achieve not 90% or 92%, but 100% pay equity, right? Across both gender and race. That's an incredible model, I think, because it seems to me that companies are doing quite well with diversity and inclusion. They can, of course, do better. But that equity piece of DI and E, the E piece seems to be kind of difficult. Why do you think those steps that you took at Nordstrom were necessary? How were they successful? And do you think all companies can achieve that?
Yeah, it's equal pay, right? We want equal pay for equal work, and it was pretty disruptive to say that we're going to do this. And I've worked for Nordstrom for 30 years, and when I started, I was thinking about the question you asked about: was there ever a time that you were not paid equally for the same job? And the truth is, I don't know, because there wasn't transparency when I started. But now there is, and so it kind of plays as a forcing function to make sure that you stay true to those values. And why is it important? Because if we really respect the people that work for our companies, they deserve to be paid the same, no matter what the color of their skin is or their gender. And so as a company, there was never a time where like, this is a bad idea. Of course, it's a good idea. It's a business imperative. And do I think every company should do it? Yes. And the way that we did it was just to do it as quickly and rapidly as we could. And it was disruptive, and some people were rattled, but it's really good to do it that way rather than taking years and years to get there. So I'm really proud of the way that we handled it.
Mm-hmm. I want to hold on to that thought too of transparency and talk about that next, but also want to hear from Stephanie Hull, who is the president and CEO of Girls Inc. And the proceeds are all going to this amazing organization. So as a president of this organization, what do you have to say and tell about the tips for advancing parity within the organization? And what are you telling your girls in LA?
Actually, we are working with girls. The national organization is working with girls all over the country and also in Canada. So there's a big audience out there really looking to all of you. First of all, thanking you for the support. It's wonderful to have that support for the work we do. But more than anything, I think we were really energized by this idea that so many people cared about this issue. I mean, I'm piecing together all the different things that everybody has said so far. But Sunny, as you pointed out, the girls we serve, the majority of them are Black and brown girls. And so it's not just that the equity issue is there for girls, just girls, but it's also the issue for girls of color. And there has not been a time in my time as an employed person when there wasn't the question of whether people of color were being paid differently. And then, of course, women are being paid differently. So I've grown up with the double whammy. And that notion that because of the way that the world works, you might feel grateful just to have a great job. You might not really feel that you are brave enough to walk in there and say, I wonder what everybody else is earning and whether I'm being paid fairly. You might be first generation in your family to have a job in the industry that you're in, or the first one in your family to be gainfully employed in a really productive way, and you're helping them. So you are the last person on earth really who's going to walk in there and try to get fired by complaining about, $1 an hour of wages. You might just let it go. So I love what I'm hearing about the transparency and about making the first move as an employer. I love the idea, Alexis, of men who have this stance being advocates and telling girls who look like my girls, hey, fair is fair. Go in there and get what you want. Because what we're telling them really is first and foremost that even as very young girls, they need to stand up for themselves. They need to have self-confidence. They need to be advocates for themselves and for each other. And they need to know how to work the network and to expect people to help you and to expect to be asked to help when it's your turn to reach a hand back. So it's, this picture could easily change. As you said, Venus, we could move to a place where this conversation is quaint and people are saying, why did that ever happen? But I can tell you, in my own life, the very first job I had, I felt grateful to have that job. And even when I found out with a bunch of my peers that we were all being paid really different amounts and that mine was by far the lowest amount, I questioned whether I should walk in there. And it was because all of us walked in there that I walked in there. I don't know that I would have done it by myself, but all of us linked arms and said, wait, this is just wrong. Let's just go. And of course, they told us, well, it's because some of you are men. And we said, oh, okay. We walked out. So it was a little bit of a fail, but it was a long time ago. And I'd like to hope that that if my girls went in there, that they'd be the first ones leading the charge, and that they would say, tell me more about that, because I too have a household. I'm in that household. I'm not the man of the family, but I have responsibilities, and I do the same work everybody else does. I think our girls have that confidence. I think listening to all of you, they will be empowered and emboldened to go in there and get what's fair and what's right for them.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that everyone seems to have alluded to, and Venus, I know that you and I have spoken about, is this notion of transparency. And it's something that I experienced at The View. I sort of just showed up at The View. Actually, I was a guest host and a guest host and a guest host. And then all of a sudden I was hired, and no announcement was really made about being there. But I got a call from Sherry Shepard once she realized that I was going to be a full-time host. And she went over her entire salary history with me from beginning to end. I don't know how she got my cell phone number. We're dear friends now. But not only did she share that with me, she also shared Jenny McCarthy's salary history and let me know that she had been a host for 7 years. And Jenny McCarthy, when she joined her first year, made more money than Sherry made at that time. And it was only after Jenny shared her salary with Sherry, that Sherry was able to go in and say, hello, I should be getting paid what she's getting paid. I've been here even longer. And so that type of sharing of metrics, that type of transparency helped me negotiate my deal. Why do you think, I know that we're taught not to talk about money, right? Especially women, I think. Yeah. I talk to my 14-year-old daughter about money all the time because I want her to know about it. Why do you think that is, Venus? Why don't we ask for what our worth is, our value is? I know that, your journey began in 2005 when you fought and you actually achieved equal prize money for women at Wimbledon. And you penned that famous op-ed on that groundbreaking experience. But why do you think this is still happening?
Well, I think a lot of us or the world and America as well, we're still dealing with cultural norms. So we've seen a lot more women start to enter the workplace since the 1980s, but that's relatively a short time ago. So we're still dealing with cultural norms, biases of how women are supposed to act. So it is important to have those conversations and important to just be upfront about it. And once you take that first step, it gets a little bit easier. And I love these conversations of transparency and how women can also help each other to do so. I definitely want to ask our other panelists about it. Dawn, Jen, how do you have those conversations in your workplace and leading at Credo and in Nordstrom's? Jen, do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. Sunny, I was reflecting on your story that you told at the beginning and how much of your time it took to actually fight that battle and in order to come out on the other side of it. And I'm lucky because I work for a company that is mainly women. And so a lot of this conversation, frankly, when I was asked to do this, I had to go back and think about, gosh, it's been so long since I've had that experience. And I'm hopeful for us to have other companies move to the place where we are. But I guess what I would say is, for my own experience is exactly what you said, Venus, is that, was I going to be, the B word if I came in and asked for more money? And the difference between that and just being an assertive person. And I just got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to be an assertive person. And if people want to call me names, they can. Mm-hmm. And I've encouraged a lot of the women for me to practice negotiating, that they should never just accept it. The worst thing that's going to happen is someone will say no. But that they have to try and they need to ask questions. And one of the questions I always have people ask is, to their supervisor, can you look me in the eye and tell me that I'm getting paid fairly compared to my county? And that makes the leader go back and really do some research on that so that they can come back and be honest with their teams. So that's my experience.
Mm-hmm. And Dawn, the wage gap has been particularly prevalent in the beauty industry. Can you tell us how Credo has dealt with this issue firsthand?
Yeah, so a lot like Jen, I have had the luck of working in many female-run organizations. And so we focus our attention a lot on how we can be advocates and role models for others in the organization. So specifically at Credo, we hire above minimum wage. We hire trained estheticians and makeup artists. Like, we're trying to level up that experience in the retail organization. But we also foster this community of badass entrepreneurs. Venus is one of them. 135 brands in our stores, primarily women, and access to capital, right? There's a wage gap, but there's also access to capital. And if you look at the VC world, and if you are a woman, you're going to get, it's harder to fundraise. If you're a brown woman, it's harder to fundraise. So this idea of how can we provide access to capital? How can we work with our entrepreneurs for connections, for being prepared when they go in those meetings? We talked a little bit about cultural norms. You're going to likely present to 100% white men. So what do you need to be prepared for? And how do you get those connections to start asking those so that we can get money and access to capital to grow these businesses? Because as entrepreneurs, sometimes it's a little bit less about the wages across the organization and much more about, do you have the capital to grow and the access to the people who have the capital? Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time talking about it. We did a BIPOC mentorship program. We brought in some really awesome female investors with cash, and we talked about the secrets of what you never ask in a VC pitch, and said, what do you need in your deck? So really tactical, trying to be a role model out there, because we work in a majority female organization, so that's a little bit less.
That's really, really powerful, and really embedded into your company culture is closing that gap. That's really exciting. And plus I love Credo. So
love.
Tracy, also you're working in the wellness industry as well. And why was it so important for you and the Tracy Anderson Studio, which is all you and all your fantastic trainers, to get involved in Ellevest's Privilege Tax Initiative?
Yeah, I think that everything that everyone's talking about it's so important. And Dawn, what you just brought up about equity, I have a new pal in Lori Talbert Marcus. She was with PepsiCo for 20 years. She was the interim CMO for Peloton, and she and 6 or 8 other women are writing this incredible book right now we're talking about all of the conscious things that have occurred in discrimination and pay inequality, but they're writing a book on all of the unconscious ways in which they were coming up in their careers. Like, for instance, when the man leaves work early to go and pick up the son, take the child to soccer practice, he's such a great guy. Look at what a great guy is. But if the woman has to go leave work to take her child something, it's a distraction. It's yet another reason why or things like, the woman in the room is always asked to do the note taking or the part, all these unconscious things. So I think that raising awareness and us, all of us as women who are founders of companies or owners, like, I take a huge responsibility. I mean, it was just a couple of years ago where I took the wheel and I was like, you know what? I birthed this thing and I'm the CEO now, and I don't care what anyone says, and I don't care if you look at me sideways like I shouldn't be doing this. I'm doing this now because I'm taking the keys. I'm not passing the keys because everyone's like, oh, I need to do that. I'll do that. And one of the things that's so crazy, and what Alexis said about how it's going to take a long time. My daughter, I have a 22-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. My daughter was born in 2012. Over the time period of 1991 to 2011, the median income for college-educated women was flat at 2/3 the level of male earnings. For that whole entire time period, it was flat, right? So we do have a long way to go, and we have a long way to go as women. But as you know, Stephanie knows in her line of work, she's a double whammy. It's not acceptable, you know. So even more for a woman in my position to just absolutely have my voice be heard. And I mean, I hate to bring it up, but it's an amazing breakthrough. If you all watched Oprah with Meghan Markle, I mean, we all need to praise that woman like in so many ways, because all of it's abusive, you know. So for somebody in her position to be that vocal about what she was going through at that level, it's such an empowering way for, you know, women to go, I can go into the room. Or, you know, women who are suffering that double whammy of discrimination to go, you know what, I can go into the room. I can ask for what I'm worth. You know?
That is such an important thing that you just said, Tracy, because I think there is this fear, you know, to walk into the room and ask for your worth and ask for your value. And because there is this, it's so opaque. You know, no one knows what anyone is making. You feel that it's gauche to ask. You know, it's actually illegal in many states, most states, for an employer to ask you about your past salary, but they often do it anyway. So women are typically stuck at the same salary. But, you know, we do have a question from one of the thousands of people that are watching, and I'm so thrilled that so many people are watching this with us, Venus, and our panelists. The question is, what resources are available other than Glassdoor for women to better inform themselves of comparable salaries in their field or their company? Glassdoor definitely does not provide enough info, someone is saying. So again, the need for information. Who can take that question?
It's a tricky one. I was going to say it's a really hard one, and I'm like all ears if people have other ideas. I use my networks a lot. I use Raise is an organization out of the Silicon Valley, which is trying to get equity both in diversity and with women. But I lean on my network quite a bit when negotiating equity, salaries, because it's hard to get information, especially as you move up in your career. So I'm like super curious too. What else besides Glassdoor? And I use my networks. I ask a lot. I ask men. I ask women, and I keep records of all the information I get, and I share it as much as I can.
Yeah, I also share information. I can tell you that after my experience with Sherry Shepherd, I used to work at CNN. Now I speak to people that were in the same position that I was in on air, and I say, this was my salary history, just trying to pay it forward. I also know that Sheryl Sandberg, who I am privileged to be able to have conversations with her, she has done a lot of work in this space in terms of some transparency with her Lean organization. So there is some information there, but it's not necessarily specific to companies. Stephanie, what about you? Do you have any suggestions?
Would say, I mean, the great thing about this question is it really points out that too much of this still depends on people like us. You know, unfortunately, in the nonprofit world, we have people report on their Form 990, and we can get sort of a trailing bit of information about people. So it's not the exact moment, but you can extrapolate and sort of see trends. So we are able to do studies of all of our various positions, and we can look at them by geography and nationally. So I'm in the position that I can fairly easily benchmark. If I can define the job specifically enough, I can benchmark that position. That information it costs money. It's accessible to anybody who can pay the $5,000 or $6,000 a year that it costs us to keep up to date with that. And so it's not that individuals really honestly have access to that. And I think that the companies that do that work are not going to make it available to the general public. So it will be with us to be open about it and to be straightforward and to be able to look employees in the eye and say, we did the study, this is where you come out on that study. So, what we've taken to doing, and I know a lot of our peers do this too, is to publish bands, percentiles, and to communicate that way. It doesn't necessarily mean, as you were alluding to earlier, Sunny, some people have more experience, some people have other assets you value, but you can at least get a sense of where you think you stand. If somebody will say that the 12th percentile in this position is this dollar amount, you can kind of work from there and know are you in the ballpark, and what do you need to be able to do to move yourself up? But the combination of being willing to make it easier for people that we know are scared to have this conversation, and then trying to raise a generation of people who are looking at us and thinking, what's wrong with them? Why don't they just advocate for themselves? I mean, that's the world I really want to get to, is one where people don't understand why we would hesitate, why we'd be outside the door sort of saying, how am I going to put this? And, they just know, look, I do this work and I can see how well I do it. Here's my evaluation. You said I was great. Where are the dollars that correspond to this? And financial literacy, understanding money, knowing how money works, and knowing your budget and how you need to live your life and what amount of money you need to live that life. All of that it's still on people. It's still, I don't know that there are agencies that will provide that transparency. So, the fact that we are willing to do it, and if big companies like Nordstrom do it, they can maybe shame other companies into doing it. I mean, that's a piece of this, that we have to be able to look each other in the eye as adults and as people who care about young people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely going to be from the top down, the shaming pressure, as well as there is an unfair advantage I think some of the strongest companies get if they have a clearly defined strategy that is publicized, that's transparent, where they have like a regular, maybe yearly comp audit within the company. Now, we as investors will do that for our portfolio companies. We work a lot of early stage ones, so they don't necessarily have like a head of finance or a head of people yet because they're maybe 10 people. But we invest all the way up to pre-IPO. And so as these companies get bigger, I think the ones that are going to have an unfair advantage, especially in a world now where work is a lot more remote and decentralized, and there's a lot more nuance, and different companies are going to take different approaches to paying someone in the Bay Area the same amount as someone in Omaha, Nebraska. But I do think talent has more leverage in this new world, and I think it's important as ever, if you want to get the very best people, to have a clear strategy around pay equity. Because I think more and more men actually care about that too. They care about the kind of companies that they work for. And then from the bottom up, Dawn, you mentioned Allraise, great startup. Ladder.2 is another one that's basically like a LinkedIn meets Reddit for college kids. I think the story I see there with the next generation, whether they are all digital natives, and whether whether they're going to get told by a transparent organization and be attracted and want to work there, or whether they're just going to find out because of these online communities where people are anonymously sharing the information. The tools are coming, and they're coming much faster than I think the industry is going to change. And I think that'll be the bottom up pressure, because better organizations are going to attract more and more good talent. Worse organizations are going to wonder, like, why is no one responding to our calls for hiring? And I think that's going to be a great catalyst too. And it's because this is a generation that's so comfortable sharing this information with total strangers, not just pulling aside someone who's a colleague, but random people on the internet who are all interested in that industry and share notes and want to be successful. And I think that's a great equalizer.
And Alexis, while you're talking about that, can we hear from the male perspective? You're the only one here we can ask right now. What do you think needs to be done across all industries to make a change from the male perspective? What are your thoughts?
And do men share their salary histories?
Yeah.
About that.
That's interesting. I don't know if I'm the best. I mean, this is data point of one. I think it is much more common. And I think so, yes. And more broadly, okay, it's interesting. I grew up in a pretty very middle class setup. And, in the last 15 years of my career, I've had a lot of success. And I feel like as I've gotten more successful and accumulated wealth that, my parents could have only dreamed of, I've unlocked levels to the game that I didn't know existed, where I learned something new and I was like, oh, okay, like this is the secret to, this is some investment strategy. This is how wealthier people think about blah, blah, blah. Or and I feel like I keep getting into new rooms where I learn yet another thing that, like, I guess rich white dudes all knew and all talked about that I just wasn't let in on yet. And it's an eye-opening thing, because obviously my experience has been one of tremendous privilege. And if I still feel this way, it just makes me think, my goodness, like, how deep does this rabbit hole really go in terms of access? And because I'm doing really well, and yet I'm still learning things where I'm like, damn, why didn't someone tell me about, like, why, like, how did I not realize this was a hack, or this was a smarter approach or a better way to do this? And so if I'm learning this stuff, my goodness, there is a lot of work to be done. And so in that vein, I think one of the ways I think one of the ways this sort of white patriarchy has continued to endure is because, especially these sort of elitist white patriarchies continue to endure, because there was this kinship, and there was this feeling of, let's share notes, let's all help one another out. And I actually don't think most of it was malicious. Well, plenty of it was malicious, but I think a lot of it was actually just done in a sort of innocuous way. And I think that is the sort of insidious part of it, because I think we don't necessarily realize just how broken the system is, because, you know, I think a lot of well-intentioned folks were not seeking to create this kind of situation. They were just hiring people who they got along with, who they went to the same golf club and a golf course, and of course they love playing with each other. So why not work together? Why not do a deal together? And I actually think that's the nefarious part of it. I was a European history major. There's an amazing book about the banality of evil, which talks about Nazism through the lens of all the like boring bureaucrats who just sort of did their jobs, and how a lot of it was actually, I mean, there was plenty of really sinister stuff, but a lot of it was perpetrated by, you know, pretty average, boring Germans who just participated in a greater system. And I think if we think about these things through these lenses, there's a lot of these systems that have put in place that were not necessarily nefarious, but just easy and comfortable. And so the way to break them that I look forward to seeing happen is by addressing them and challenging them, and then for everyone else to basically build their own version. There's some great quote that's not mine about not getting a seat to the table and deciding to build a new one, that I think really embodies this spirit. And technology, it turns out, can be really democratizing in this way. And so I'm in it selfishly, because I actually think that businesses are better when they have diverse, equitable, and inclusive teams. I actually think I make more money as an investor if half of my team are women, if at least in our case, it's 776, half are underrepresented in venture as a non-white minorities. And I actually think our portfolio companies are better off if they do this work early. And I think pay equity is like foundational, right? Like that is literally the job, is you do work in exchange for money. And if you get that right, and no one gets it perfect, but if you get it right and then build a process where when you get it wrong, you get it fixed, I think you actually will have a much bigger advantage. And unfortunately, this experiment takes lots of hard work and a decade or two of people being successful with it. But I think the receipts are going to be there. And so I would call on my fellow wealthy white dudes with privilege to say, look, like there's actually money to be made here. Like forget the societal impact. Like that's obviously really important, but you should want this because it's going to make better companies. It's going to make better investments. It's going to make better things. Capitalism will actually work better if you have more voices at the table, more people actually sitting at the table. You know, now we have to roll up our sleeves and actually do the work, but there's my hot take on it.
That's a lot of men that need to become realized, and they have to have a really serious growth mindset, because there's a lot of fixed ones out there. So go get them, Alexis. That was very compelling.
You don't have a choice.
We want to open it up for Q&A, because we only have another 15 minutes left, or a little less than that. So they're saying to please submit your questions through the Ask a Question button on your screen. And I think, Venus, you can see the question. So
yes, we have questions coming in. So use that Ask a Question button on your screen. And first question we have here is, I'm a manager, and how do I address this issue? Ask other managers their direct report salaries and bring to executive team HR. So how can managers address this issue? I think that's a good one for Jen, because Nordstrom's has achieved 100% pay equity. So tell us how.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, I think what you're asking is, what is my role in this as a leader? And since you've decided to be a leader, your role is to be completely selfless and advocate for the people that work for you. So that would mean elevating it to whoever it is that has the authority to make the decision that you need them to make, and not to be afraid of what the consequences of that will be, because it's only going to be good for you, because your team is going to know to trust you and they're going to work harder for you. So that would be my advice.
Great advice. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Stephanie?
I agree. I mean, I think that the manager can bring that up, but I also think HR people need to, sort of hear that that's coming and be willing to be open, because I think even for a manager, you have to be selfless. You have to not be afraid. And we've sort of said at all levels, there's a threat that kind of lingers here that, you'll make yourself unpopular. You will be edged out eventually. You'll end up with a lawyer and a lawsuit. And, I think the undercurrent of that is really unpleasant. So to pull a piece from what Alexis is saying, maybe people just don't know, and maybe they're not evil. If we can kind of work with that assumption that this is an educational process, and, you have to set a lot aside, I grant you, to believe people don't mean it and they didn't mean to, but maybe coming at it from that perspective to say, hey, this came to my attention. I know you'll want to know. It might be an easier, way to get your foot in the door and not to be afraid to even start the conversation, because it could be that they just say, oh, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to straighten that out. And, we can compensate people fairly.
I would just add a quick tip. Always talk to your manager, not in a review cycle. So you're not holding them hostage. Come and have a proactive conversation and say, I'm trying to build my career. I'd like to talk about wage bands. Where do I sit relative to my peers? But don't do it under the threat of my review is next week. Do it off cycle so that we can have a nice, wonderful dialogue where we're both not stressed out.
That's very good advice. There's another question. Actually, this is for you, Venus. What inspired you to launch Privilege Tax, #Privilege Tax, and what can I do to support? I don't have an e-commerce business to charge tax, but still want to support.
Okay, thank you so much. I personally faced pay inequality when I got on tour as a young person, and it just wasn't equal. So it's something I inherited. And so fighting against that as a professional athlete was really, like I said, beyond my dreams. And also there's other women's sports who are facing that same threat right now. So if you don't have an e-commerce site, that's fine. There are amazing organizations, and Tracy here and Jen here from Nordstrom's, and Happy Viking, Goal 5, Angel City, Credo, of course, Dawn with Credo, Ellevest, Society 9. All these things are going to benefit Girls Inc. So if you just go on those websites, and at checkout, you can opt in for paying the 19 cents for every e-com order, or you can, donate directly to Girls Inc. And the power's in numbers. So go ahead and share with your network and with your family and with your peers, and take action. #Privilege Tax. And you can learn more at 11byvenus.com.
And it's such an important initiative, because that, if you think about it, 19 cents, it still makes such a significant difference per purchase. There's another question. Is this only relevant to young girls starting their careers? I'm 20 years in. Can I still ask, or am I too late? I'm 52 and I just asked. I'm 25 years in. So my answer is, it is never too late to ask for pay equity. But I send that out to the panel.
It's probably easier now. It's probably easier now because you have a reputation and experience, and you have worth in the market. So yeah, it's actually even harder when you're younger.
Yeah, and you can move the needle for younger women to not have to be in that position. And you can also me as a founder, when I became CEO, it meant a lot to me to go out and see where I do fall in the marketplace, because for a lot of people, I'm not as big as Nordstrom's or anything like that. It's important that we press founders and CEOs to know. And if you care about being in that top 75% and you care about all that kind of stuff with how you pay people, and you care about these things, everyone needs to know. And as an employee, you should know if they know where and what that sort of trajectory looks like for you. And I think that asking all of those questions, this is your career, this is your time, your talent, your contribution, you know.
I think we have another question.
Yeah.
And this one is, what is the one thing that you wish someone had told you as you were working your way through the ranks?
Okay, I'm just going to go quickly. I am a working mom, and I had always thought my career was going to be a straight line. And I was very geared to achievement every step of the way. And I will tell you that during my late 30s and 40s, when I decided to have 3 kids in 4 years, that wasn't possible anymore. And I took a variety of different career choices. And what I don't think I appreciated at the time was that helped me get to where I am now. But this idea that I was supposed to be going up on a straight line was hard. And that goes into this pay gap. And when you think about who takes time off and where the mat leave or paternity leaves sit and how family friendly these organizations are, there's a lot of lost gains by women during that period. So that's my working mom spiel.
You know, there's another question that I think is really important to address. And the question is it smart to ask for a raise during pandemic times? Do I risk seeming unreasonable? Which is probably a valid concern.
Yeah. I think that yeah, go ahead. Go, Stephanie, go.
I'm going to just jump in. I can maybe answer both at the same time. I think during the pandemic, depends on your organization. I mean, our organization, we're a nonprofit, and so many nonprofits suffered so badly during the pandemic. I think it might not be a moment if your industry is struggling, but it's still a moment to have the conversation, that we were talking about earlier, just about, where do things stand and where am I and what could I be doing that, because I am looking to be paid really well for work I'm doing really well, where is that and what can I do now so that when things are in a better place, I can be positioned to get the raise that I think I deserve. Because you don't have to get the money to get to getting yourself in line and to start that conversation. And I would say, in terms of what I wish people had told me, it was things like that you should be looking for a job that you value, that you love, that feeds your soul, but you shouldn't necessarily say that is compensation. I mean, that counts, but the employer should still pay you fairly. And too many women, I think, get into these passion projects and say, oh, but I love the work I do, and it's okay if I just, take a pay cut. And, but somebody should tell us, especially as women, you can love what you do and work incredibly hard at it, but you should still look to be paid fairly for what you do. So all around, I think it's about mentoring. It's about being willing to be a mentor once you've gotten to a certain good place, but not being ashamed or embarrassed to look for a mentor and ask those questions on your way up.
Mm-hmm. We'd love to hear everyone's perspective on this question. Tracy, what would you wish you had known as you worked your way through the ranks?
Yeah, I wish that I didn't shut up my gut a lot. I wish I didn't silence myself. And I think a lot of women do that. I think it, and I really felt for Stephanie earlier when you were saying like that you just were grateful to have the, that entrapment inside, we're such nurturing beings too, that we will do that to ourselves. And there is a way to communicate without, coming across, like you're entitled or you're whatever. There's a way to do it, and at getting educated. I love how everyone's encouraging people to really get educated, to connect. I think, Sunny, what you have done, that fight that I didn't even know that's extraordinarily powerful for women everywhere, that you did that and you kept your job through it. And, most people would be so afraid that they would get fired or they would, and then look at what happened. You got what you needed. And what you did for everyone else it's such a brave thing to do. So that, and then there's also like in Coldplay's Major Minus song, you got to turn to be heard. If someone's not hearing you, don't just go, I didn't deserve to be heard. Maybe that's not the right job for you. Do it smart. Make sure you can take care of yourself, pay your bills, all that kind of stuff. But just know that if someone's not hearing you, you might have to turn to get heard. It might not be the right place for you.
Mm-hmm. And Jen?
I love what you just said, Tracy. I pictured myself in 5th grade raising my hand to answer a question and getting it wrong. And I felt like I spent my whole life trying not to raise my hand and get it wrong again. And guess what? I got it wrong a lot. Now
we all get it wrong a lot.
Yeah.
We all get it wrong a lot. Men really get it wrong a lot. So sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We all get it wrong.
I think it's that. It's having courage and not just for courage's sake, but because someone else might be thinking it and they might be afraid to say it, another person in the room. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You know, the teacher will tell you you're wrong. It wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So true.
Absolutely. Alexis, what are your thoughts? You're on mute.
I feel like, I don't know, any advice I give, it's a little like I just want to echo or sort of underscore a few of the things that we've all heard, right? That your career not being a straight line one was that one. I'm just like nodding along to it. And I think especially, I'm going to make some generalizations here, but I think it's backed up by data. I'm pretty sure it is, that women outperform men in school. And if I'm going to extrapolate that, I think there is, if we think about our education system, you know, it happens to be pretty antiquated for a lot of reasons, but it's putting people in situations where they get really good at like understanding systems and doing well and getting the good grades, and real life doesn't have a syllabus. Real life doesn't have a teacher that you can ask for, you know, some help with an assignment or any different stuff. There is a different dynamic here at play, and I think it is going to be incumbent on us as employers and investors to either create workplaces or back workplaces where we're just looking very differently at talent altogether. One of the things that Kayla opened my eyes to was hiring not for someone's ability to do the job today, but their potential to do the job. And even looking at that criteria opened our lens so much wider for hiring, because we were no longer looking for specific experience having done that role for some number of years. We were looking for the potential to do this role. And by doing that, we got a broader range of applicants because people didn't feel like they had to filter through some sort of expectations of this many years of experience doing this kind of a specific job. And all that was just changing the job description and the requirements that we were looking for. And so I think if we are honest with ourselves and we say, okay, look, just about everyone's career ends up not being a straight line. And all of the systems that we've developed leading up to becoming an adult operate as though it's basically a straight line. Like you get from one grade to the next, to get good enough grades, go to the next, but life is not linear. And yet all of our experiences leading up to entering the workforce are designed to be very linear and very pass fail. And so let's start building systems, as well as improving education. Let's start building systems that are more honest about that. Because I do that like that really resonated even for me as someone who has all the advantages that I've had. And I just want to say, I do think I'm heartened by the fact that I know I'm the only person, only man literally on this panel, but I know there are lots and lots, especially of the new generation of CEOs who are also men, who are also straight white men, who really want to see better organizations, who want to see more equitable workforces, and not just because they have daughters, but because they know that it's going to mean a better outcome for everyone.
I can add my 2 cents here quickly because I know we've gone over time. I wish that someone would have advised. I wish I would have had more lessons on financial literacy. And I certainly think that I wish I would have been given permission almost to ask questions about salaries, ask questions about salary history, as opposed to sort of being indoctrinated in the notion somehow that, you know, nice women don't do that. Don't talk about money. Don't ask for more. Because I know that I've always known my worth and my value. But I was sort of trained not to ask for more. And I don't do that anymore. And thank you, Tracy, for your kind words. And I certainly advise my children differently. But I wish I had that advice much earlier in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And Venus?
Me? I love all the advice. The career is definitely not linear. I definitely learned that. I think putting fear in its proper place. I think sometimes when we're afraid, we feel guilty for being afraid. But in order to have courage, you have to have fear first. And just understanding that fear is a part of the process. You're fearful to ask for your raise. That's fine. Fear is a part of it. But to have courage, you have to have that fear. So once you understand that, then it makes it easier to just to be human. And sometimes as humans, we're afraid, but not to feel bad about it or feel less strong or feel like you have to be invincible and that everyone's afraid. So yeah, knowing that fear is okay, and not to let it stop you.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to close it out because we've gone over time. I feel like we could talk about this issue forever. But Venus, why don't you tell people a little bit more about how they can join the privilege tax movement?
Absolutely. Guys, go over to 11byvenus.com to get more information and go support by donating to Girls Inc., the Los Angeles chapter or the national chapter. And you can go ahead and support any of our partners, Nordstrom's or Credo or Tracy Anderson's studio, Asutra, and many others, and click that checkbox and donate the 19 cents to close the gap. Thank you guys for watching. And I want to thank all of our amazing hosts. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I definitely foresee us doing this again next year and then expanding upon this program throughout the year. I'm extremely passionate about this, having experienced it myself and what that battle took for years to get to equality. And I know every single one of you experienced it here. Thank you, Alexis, for joining us also and letting us gang up on you. Alexis and I have the best conversations. We were talking about equality like a week ago on like a Saturday night, and Olympia's sitting there playing, and we're just having this conversation. So thank you for joining us. And every single one of you, thank you so much. And everything that you're doing in your organizations today, right now, to close that gap. So let's continue this. Thank you for being a part of it. And everyone go to 11byvenus.com to learn more.
Thank you for being such a superwoman, Venus. Thank you for doing this. It takes a lot of effort and energy to do this. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe and be well, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.